So in this video, we're going to talk about Glyn Maxwell's play, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, I've been reading a number of Jekyll and Hyde adaptations of late, and I've actually got several more on my stack to read, so you'll be getting more videos about Jekyll and Hyde plays. But I've kind of come to the conclusion that as long as you have a character named Jekyll, who drinks some kind of potion to separate out an evil side of themselves named Hyde, that's all you really need to call it a version of Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I mean, this is the thing listed here under the title is a new stage version by Glyn Maxwell based on the novel by Robert Louis Stevenson. Other than Jekyll and Hyde existing and there being a potion, virtually nothing else in this play is what Stevenson put in his novel. So it is this interesting phenomenon where versions of the novel rarely, if ever, have anything to do with the novel itself. So, for instance, in this play, there are 4 characters. Jekyll and Hyde are 2 different characters played by 2 different actors, which is actually pretty unique, I think, in Jekyll and Hyde adaptations. There's another adaptation that I read. I can't remember who it's by. I was trying to look at my stack of books back there, which is behind my laptop there. But there's another version I read where in the preface, the playwright talked about how they tried to do that, to have 2 different actors who sort of argued with themselves as Jekyll and Hyde, and it didn't work. Like, audiences didn't respond to it. In this case, Jekyll and Hyde actually do need to be 2 characters because there are a couple of scenes toward the end where, unlike in Stevenson's novel, where Jekyll changes into Hyde and then vice versa, here Jekyll and Hyde actually split into 2 distinct beings. So Jekyll and Hyde are able to confront one another as distinct beings. So you kind of do need the 2 characters, the 2 actors in this case. But then your other 2 characters in this play are Lady Gabriel Utterson and Miss Rose Palfrey. Lady Gabriel Utterson shares a name with John Gabriel Utterson, who is in the novel, but is a completely different character. In the novel, Utterson is a lawyer. He actually is sort of the main person the novel follows as he's trying to figure out what is going on with Jekyll and Hyde and all this stuff. But he's a lawyer. He's not a scientist. And he's male. In this play, Lady Gabriel Utterson is female. She is sort of a scientist, though, as her niece Rose questions, "So you were a member of the society?" That's the Royal Society of Scientists. Gabriel says, "I was one of them, or I was the wife of one." Rose says, "But if you knew what he knew," that's Henry Jekyll, "they should have let you join." Gabriel says, "Oh, Devonshire lass." Rose says, "What do you mean?" Gabriel says, "See if you can guess why I couldn't be a member." So this Utterson, this Gabriel Utterson, is a scientist, quasi-scientist at least. I'd say she's a scientist. She had been Jekyll's research assistant in the early phases of his experiments before the stuff that he was doing got too outlandish for her. And she was then sort of a wealthy patroness to Jekyll, but she's since cut him off. And then we've got Rose Palfrey, who is her niece from the country, Devonshire. She comes in, and basically she kind of becomes a new woman. So in the late 1800s, 1880s, and especially into the 1890s, there was this group, not a group, but there was this trend of new women. So these were women who rejected the domestic role for women. They challenged the idea that women were the weaker sex, and they often dressed in men's clothing. They smoked pipes and cigars, which were traditionally male things to smoke, whereas women smoked cigarettes, men smoked cigars and pipes. They often drank. They often engaged in romantic affairs, including with other women in some cases. The new women worked. They walked about the city by themselves, etc., etc. And Rose does make this declaration: "I am Rosemary of London town, in the care of Lady Utterson, and I come and go as I please." So this is this declaration of independence in a way. She explores London by herself, even though she does not know London. And so Lady Gabriel is continually concerned that she's going to get lost or murdered or whatever it is. And so that's an element. Rose is also interested in science. Like, she goes to the lectures of the Royal Academy of Sciences. She goes to, like, public lectures about scientific, political, sociological, religious, etc., topics were a really big thing in the late Victorian era, and Rose is interested in all of these things. When Rose and Lady Gabriel go to Jekyll's house, because Jekyll is now sort of in despair. His experiments are successful, but he doesn't fully understand what's happening, and he needs Lady Gabriel's help to create more of the formula. There's this whole bit with that. So Rose and Lady Gabriel go to Jekyll's house. Jekyll and Lady Gabriel are talking in private, and Rose wanders through the house, even though she's supposed to have just stayed put. And she gets into Jekyll's laboratory and just starts checking out his stuff. Interestingly enough, she breathes into one of the vials of Jekyll's formula, which slightly changes the color of it, so she kind of tries to hide it. That becomes important toward the end of the play. But basically, she is this sort of headstrong scientist type. We get the feeling that she's more or less like Lady Gabriel was when she started as Jekyll's sort of research assistant, basically. So that's actually the central plot, I would say, of this play, is the conflict between Lady Gabriel and Rose. Lady Gabriel as this sort of voice of caution, like, be careful about what types of knowledge you pursue, and Rose about, I'm a scientist, I'm going to pursue this knowledge regardless of any potential consequences. This is also the conflict between Lady Gabriel and Jekyll, because Lady Gabriel says, dude, you gotta stop these crazy experiments, things are going to go wrong. And Jekyll's like, no, I'm a scientist, I need to pursue this knowledge. So both Rose and Jekyll have this kind of hubris to them. Jekyll in this is another play, like we see this a lot in stage versions where Henry Jekyll, unlike in the novel where he works in secret by himself, Henry Jekyll here has told other people about the experiments that he's doing. But because Lady Gabriel has stopped working with him, Jekyll doesn't seem to be documenting his experiences as objectively and scientifically as he otherwise might. So the first thing we actually get in the play is Jekyll recording in his notebook this dream that he's had. And the dream is the famous scene from Stevenson's novel, actually using a lot of the language from Stevenson's novel, which we get in a few places in this play, in which Hyde tramples over a match girl, a small child in urban London who's selling matches to try and make a little bit of money, etc., etc. So Jekyll records this as a dream that he's had that's then sort of confirmed by news that comes in that a child has been trampled in this way. But Jekyll is troubled because he finds matches in his clothes that are not the brand of matches that he buys. So this is what sort of prompts him to try and get Utterson to come and help him out. Also in this play, another difference that we have, sort of another difference, I guess, is a real conflict between Jekyll and Hyde over each of their existence. Because Hyde is trying, so again, the thing is, unlike in Stevenson's novel where one turns into the other, in this case, they actually figure out a way to separate out, which is what Jekyll kind of actually says he wants in the novel, but he never gets that. So Hyde becomes an actual separate being because Jekyll drinks part of the formula that Rose had breathed on. And so the goal then kind of becomes both for Hyde and to a certain extent for Jekyll to create independent life for each of them. This does not work. The formula can only temporarily separate them before one or the other disappears. The ending is somewhat odd in terms of the way it resolves this situation. So Rose is there with Jekyll and Hyde. They are separated out from one another. Rose is supposed to record the results of this experiment where they are separated out from one another, and then go sort of tell the world Jekyll's story, etc., etc. Jekyll and Hyde are both there, and Rose basically gets Jekyll to acknowledge that Hyde is him, that they are the same being. And then Jekyll and Hyde sort of embrace one another, they merge together, and then Jekyll drinks, presumably cyanide. He drinks some sort of poison before the mob coming to take revenge for the murder of Sir Danvers Carew can break in and capture him alive. So it's a weird ending in that sense, but it sort of physicalizes on stage this idea at the end of Stevenson's novel where Jekyll accepts that Hyde is him, that they are not separate, that Hyde is the embodiment of Jekyll's own desires. One other thing that strikes me about this version is that Hyde here seems much more disjointed and incoherent than he does in Stevenson's novel. In Stevenson's novel, Hyde is evil, he is violent, but he's also clever. He is a thoughtful, cunning, maybe is a better word for it, character. Here, Hyde seems more disoriented. Like his speech is confused and repetitive, etc., etc. So, for instance, in this one section at the beginning of Act 3, we just have Hyde it's not clear where he is necessarily. I think he's still supposed to be in Jekyll's house. But we get Hyde's monologue here. He says, "Gone out where? No one knows. No one knows me in my coat and boots. My coat and boots and stick by my side. Who stick by my side? I stick by my side. A new day, a new dark day out. I don't need a light. Lights light my way. Lights light for me in my coat and boots. Lights light for me. For me, my way. What's my way? No one knows. No one said to. No one made me, not the doctor. I make my way. I need more. It's the morning out. A new dark morning out. I need more is my way. I go where I get more. Could be this way, could be that. No one knows. No one said to. No one made me. Not the doctor. I make my way. I say this way to go where I get more. This way, roll up, roll up. Walking out, walking. Running, not running. No one said to. No one knows. I go flying, not flying. Coat flying, tail flying. Boots walking in air. I go flying, no one knows. No one stopped me ever. There is no one to stop me. If you stop me, you are not me." So it's a weird bit, and a lot of Hyde's lines are really sort of babbling like this, in a way that we don't necessarily get with the original character in Stevenson's novel.